ඔබ සැමට උතුම් දළදා සමුදුන්ගේ ආශිර්වාදය ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා. ඓතිහාසික කන්ද උඩරට ඇසළ පෙරහැර මහා මංගල්‍යයේ සිව්වන කුඹල් පෙරහැර අද දිනේ වීදි සංචාරය කරනවා. මේ විශේෂ වූ මහා සංස්කෘතික මංගල්‍යයේ අසිරිය අත්විඳින්නට සියසින් දැක බලා ගන්නට ඔබට මෙවර අවස්ථාවක් හිමිවන්නේ නැහැ. වෙනදා නම් මහනුවර නගරයට පැමිණ රිසිසේ ඔබ මේ පෙරහැර මහා මංගල්‍යයේ අසිරිය අත්විඳිනවා. නමුත් අපි ඔබට එම අවස්ථාව උදා කර දෙන්නේ රූපවාහිනී මාධ්‍ය ඔස්සේ සහ ශ්‍රී දළදා මාලිගාවේ නිල සමාජ මාධ්‍ය ජාල ඔස්සේ මේ පෙරහැරේ අසිරිය ඔබට ගෙන එනවා. අප සූදානම් වෙන්නේ ඓතිහාසික කන්දුඩරට ඇසළ පෙරහැර මහා මංගල්‍යයේ සිව්වන කුඹල් පෙරහැරේ මේ අසිරිය ඔබට ගෙන එන්නට. අද දිනේ සිංහරාජා හස්තියා පෙරහැර කරුණුන් වහන්සේ වැඩම කරවීමට නියමිතයි. ඒ නිසාවෙන් අපි ඔබට ගෞරවයෙන් ආරාධනා කරනවා මේ විශේෂ වූ මහා සංස්කෘතික මංගල්‍යයේ අසිරිය අත්විඳින්නට එක්කාසු වන්නට.
You are now joining with us with a special live broadcast of the 4th Kumbal Perahera brought to you by the Media Bureau of Sri Dalada Maligava.
You are seeing Perahera officials obtaining the permission and blessings of the Diyavadana Nilame before commencing their street perambulations.
This is the handing over of keys by the Devadana Nilame to the officiating bhikkhus.
And now, making his way from the upper to the lower chamber, we see the official monk of the Malvatta Vihara, Venerable Tibbatuave Medankara Thero, carrying the Perahera casket towards the royal tusker.
The relic casket is being placed within the Ranhilige, mounted on the adorned tusker, who will light up the 4th Kumbal Perahera.
And this is the devout moment when the great tusker steps majestically down from the Mahavahalkada to the Sandagala in preparation to walk in the streets of Kandy. The royal tusker today in the 4th Kumbal Perahera is the Tusker Vasana belonging to the Ruhunu Maha Katharagama Devalaya.
And now we see a bird eye view of the serene Kandy city, and that marks the beginning of the 4th Kumbal Perahera.
Walking up front with the sound of the whips piercing through the skies are the whip wielders.
When the rain god pours down life-giving water from the sky, there we hear the roaring sound of the thundering. This is the very sound symbolized by these lashing whips. They fill the Kandian sky and the hearts of the weavers alike. This is why the whip wielders are tasked with paving the way for the approaching Perahera and the sacred relic casket.
Great numbers of people throw coins into the paths of the whip masters as an award, but this year, due to the pandemic, we are missing that sight. Although the whip conjures up fear in most minds, the sight of the Perahera whip masters has the opposite effect, calming the population, since they are the ones who clear the way for the holy Perahera casket to be carried in the streets of the city.
In the times of the kings, the whip was an instrument of punishment. But this is not a duty of that nature. Here, the instrument is used to remove fear, create a sense of love and compassion among the people, and bring merit to them.
The Perahera festival is indeed a picture depicting rainfall, and the whip crackers we see in front of us are the icons representing the strike of lightning. The whipmaster's duty is handed down from generation to generation of their clans. According to our traditions, Peraheras that do not have this pedigree are not even being worth called such. And this team of whip wielders are trained by Mr. Upali Jayaratna.
The thundering sound in the skies are followed by the lightning strikes before a rain. The fireball dances that we are about to see now depict the lightning before a rain.
Just as lightning flashes across the skies, the Perahera too has its flashes of light, whipping across the faces of the people, lining the streets to watch the procession. This is the offering of fire to the gods, to water the earth with rain.
Indeed, Nilesh, the balls of fire is a spectacular sight in the Kandy Esala Perahera. The fireball wielders create cyclic patterns in the dark sky, reminding the lay spectators of the lightning that marks a soon-to-be rain. While it may seem as a sport for the young performers, the elderly see it rather as a sacred duty to please the gods.
The sight of lightning as a precursor to the descent of the rain gods is a phenomenon of nature. Those blinding flashes are a cooling heat in the Kandy Esala procession. This is the heritage of the traditions of our torch dancers.
The balls of fire these dancers are wielding in rotational forms are painting the night sky with varied patterns of light.
The sun, moon, earth, universe, solar month, night and day are all cyclic, and the fire dancers highlight these universal cycles and how they burn and cool us in our life cycles.
That's true, Nilesh. The dancers tame fire and give it as a Dalada offering, mindful of its part in cooking, protecting crops and chenas, and dispelling darkness.
And these talented performers are trained by Mr. E.D. Tilakaratna.
The true import of these dances is seen when a large group of them perform simultaneously, merging their various fiery elements into an amazing display of light and heat.
And now in front of us, we see the Buddhist flag bearers led by a national flag.
The national flag of Sri Lanka is a symbol of unity and harmony. It represents all the ethnicities that we are, and it proudly represents our cultural heritage, which runs for over 2500 years. The Buddhist flag bearers display our Buddhist inheritance that has nurtured our culture into what it is today.
The sight of the Buddhist flag creates a sense of unreflecting joy on the part of the people viewing the Kandy Esala procession, reminding them that this is celebration, devotion, and offering to the Buddha. The flag bearers can be seen coming into the site in the procession.
The hexacolored flag garlands the people with 6 colored radiation of light attributed to the Buddha's aura, cooling them as nothing else possibly can.
The Buddhist flag was jointly designed by Mr. J. R. De Silva and Colonel Henry S. Olcott to mark the revival of Buddhism in Ceylon. It was accepted as the international Buddhist flag in the year 1952 at the World Buddhist Congress.
The colors of the Buddhist flag have symbolic meanings. For instance, color blue represents the universal compassion of Lord Buddha. White represents purity and liberation, while yellow means the middle path and red marks blessings.
And those flag bearers were from the Chandananda Buddhist College, Kandy. And now in front of us, we see the sword bearers.
One may wonder the purpose of sword bearers in a Buddhist procession such as this. While Buddhism promotes non-violence, it is with utmost respect and gratefulness that we remind our heroes who sacrificed so much to ensure the protection of the sacred tooth relic and the sovereignty of the country. The sword bearers remind us of those glorious souls.
And these sword bearers too represent the students of the Chandananda Buddhist College, Kandy. The Dalada Perahera is a procession aimed at reducing and eradicating sorrow and sadness. Yet, when people see these sword bearers walking in it, there is certainly going to be a question as to why someone who is holding a weapon has been made part of it. And right after the sword bearers, we see the Perahera, the leading official, on the mount of the celebrity tusker Nedungamuwe Raja, belonging to Dr. Harsha Dharmavijaya of Veliveria. It is the norm of the procession that the Perahera, or the leader of the procession, is the first person on an elephant back, and neither any officials nor elephants are permitted to arrive before the Perahera.
Clad in white robes, the Peramuna comes into view ceremoniously carrying the secretarial scroll, which is also known as the Lekam meteor.
This scroll is encased in a round silver container as part of the traditions in this procession.
Following that, we see the first heavy troop of the 4th Kumbal Perahera.
Until the Hevisi drum beaters permanently seconded to the service of the Sri Dalada Maligava arrive in the procession, no Panchaturya Vadana or making of sound using either drums or musical instruments is permitted.
The prohibition of the use of other traditional music instruments before the first Hevisi, namely the Horanava, Talampota, cymbals, Daula, Conch, Kombua and anklets, is to ensure that the order of playing these instruments is not compromised.
And for this, the 4 great drum clans of the Sri Dalada Maligava, namely Uduwela, Malagammana, Ihalavela and Molagoda, contribute with great devotion and pageantry to the celebration. The 4 leaders depict the recognition given to them by the king through the ways in which they decorate their Hevisi drums. Amidst the tune of the Gajaga Vannama or the symphony of the elephant, we see the leader of the troop of elephants taking part in the procession, who is the Gajanayaka Nilame, who is joining the procession today on the mount of the Tusker Sindhu, belonging to the most venerable Mahanayaka Thero of the Malvatta chapter.
The Gajanayaka Nilame is the official who is in charge of the elephants of Sri Dalada Maligava.
And now in front of us, we see the Chamara dance performance. And this Chamara dance performance is trained by Nimesh Sumatiratna of the Chandananda Buddhist College once again. It is tradition to fan the sacred tooth relic, and this tradition continues when it is in procession during the Perahera.
This instrument is used in the process of fanning the nobility in the past, and now, as a part of the great procession, Kandy Esala Perahera, it gives a cooling breeze to all the viewers and also to the impending Perahera.
It is indeed fascinating to see how the younger generation of Sri Lanka is willing to take forward our culture into the future. Especially the students from the Chandananda Buddhist College, as we saw them in 3 consecutive items in today's 4th Kumbal Perahera. The simultaneous rise and fall of the fans is a gentle and joyful sight to the people who are triggered towards wholesome and devotional thoughts. And next, following this cooling dance performance, we see the first official on a tusker to carry the Buddhist flag to symbolize that this procession is truly a Buddhist Perahera. And this tusker is none other than Janaraja, belonging to the stable of the Sri Dalada Marigava. Janaraja was a tusker who was gifted to Sri Dalada Maligava in the year 1988 by the former Prime Minister J.R. Jayawardena.
And now we see the first Nayandi dancers of the 4th Kumbal Perahera to walk the streets of the hill capital. The name Nayandi refers to the costume, similar to the West dancing costume except for the headdress. The Nayandi costume represents the ancient royal regalia of the Malaya kings. This can be categorized as a segment of Rupa Natum.
And these Nayandi dance performers are trained by Mr. Vasantha Rajangana and Mr. Vasantha Gunathilaka. Following the Nayandi dance act, we see 2 majestic elephants joining the procession, and these 2 elephants can be named as Punchibanda, belonging to Mr. Kitsiri Mevan Velagedara of Panaliya, alongside with Raja, belonging to Mrs. Sita Senanayaka of Hettimulla.
And on the mounts of these majestic beasts, we can see 2 canopy bearers symbolizing the protection provided to the Kandy Esala Perahera.
It has to be noted that Raja and Punchibanda have been continuous participants of the Sri Dalada Perahera since the year 2005 with the election of the current Bas Diyavadana Nilame Pradeep Nilangadala.
And now we see the Pantheru dancers walking the streets of the Kandy city. Although the Pantheru can be seen in all the three major dance forms, the Pantheru dance is exclusively a Kandian traditional dance.
The pantheru or tambourines without the skin brings the purity of the Dalada procession into the minds of the people as they step across the promenade. The instrument is crucial to the Kavikara Madua or chanting groups of the procession.
The origin of this dance goes back to the ancient ritual called Suvisi Vivarana. Here the dancers sing praises for Lord Gautama Buddha for obtaining Vivarana from 24 previous Buddhas to attain the Buddhahood. The Pantheru is believed to have been created in the form of Chakrayuda, the prime weapon of Shakra, the king of gods.
A special feature of the Pantheru dancers in the entire procession is that they wear the original and traditional attire. In other processions across the island, the Pantheru dancers are attired in costumes, styled in various ways. Therefore, it is only in the hill capital Kandy that we are able to witness the Pantheru dance in its authentic and purest form.
And this troupe of Pantheru dancers have been trained by Mr. Sarath Vijayasiri.
And following this Pantheru dance performance, we see two majestic elephants. On one side, we see Burumaraja representing the Sri Dalada Maligava stables, alongside with Banda belonging to the Honourable Diyavadana Nilame Pradeep Nilangadala.
And once again, on the mounts of these two elephants, we see cobra heads as canopies. They too symbolize the protection provided to the sacred procession. Up next, we see one of the most spectacular sights of the Perahera, and this is a troupe of West dancers.
The most unique and the most recognized of the Kandian dance heritage is the fully adorned West Natua of the Kandian dancer. The Kandian dancer's skill and the dance form have been brought to the national consciousness by the Dalada Perahera alone.
In the ancient times, the dancers obtained a royal boon after having donned their Vestatua and danced for the king of Panduvasnuvara to dispel unseen inimical forces that threatened his life.
Therefore, In the procession, in order to pay their respect to the Perahera casket, the king, and of course the Nilame, they line in the path in which they tread in two files of dancers, and these two files are represented by Ishanta Ihalavila and Lasantha Vansekara.
The West dancers are paying their homage and inviting the following majestic beasts to step on the streets of Kandy to light up the Kandy Esala Perahera.
In fact, to speak a little about their costume, this costume consists of 64 different pieces of accessories, and this has become an icon of our beautiful country.
Indeed, Nilesh. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the 64-piece of cloth that the West Natua or the West dancer is wearing represents the royal regalia of Malaya kings who came to Sri Lanka to dispel the evil, the curse of Kueni.
And we are just about to witness the most spectacular moment of today's 4th Kumbal Perahera, the arrival of the royal tusker carrying the sacred Perahera relic casket. And in front of the casket we see the Karya Korala.
The Karya Karavana Korale is the second in command of the Diyavarana Nilame, and it is a heritage position given by royal decree.
And today, the great task of carrying the Dalada Perahera casket falls to a very fortunate tusker. Today, that task has been assigned to Vasana, belonging to the Ruhuru Maha Kataragama Devalaya. And accompanying Vasana, we see Singharaja, belonging to the Sri Dalada Maligava stables, alongside with Kandula, belonging to Venerable Kollupitiye Mahinda Sangarakita Thero, the chief incumbent of the historic Kalaniya Rajamaha Viharaya.
The elephant alone is decked in golden neck and ear ornaments. It is indeed a spectacular sight. And following that, we see the chamber of versifiers or the Kavikara Maduva of Sri Dalada Maligava. The Kavikara Maduva or the chamber of versifiers are singing praises and hymns in honor of Lord Buddha. Up next, we see the next West troop.
It is the custom in the Kumbal Perahera processions. We do not see the Devadra Nilame apart from the first Kumbal Perahera. And today we see the Vasnayak Nilame of a Devala shrine representing the fourth Kumbal Perahera, who are welcomed by these West dancers, who are represented by the teams of Sanjeeva Verapitiya and Peter Surasena.
We now see the West dancers making an act of Narumatra, adding more color to the procession.
Welcomed by these West dancers, we now see the representation of the Devadara Nilame, who is the Honorable Basnayaka Nilame of the Sri Maha Kataragama Devale in Kandy, Mr. Gamunu Tilaka Bandara Walisundara. As said before, we only see the Devadra Nilame in the first Kumbal Perahera, whereas in the second, third, fourth and fifth, we see the representations of the respective Basnayaka Nilames of the shrines of God Natha, Vishnu, Kataragama and Pattini respectively.
Clad in white garments and royal regalia, the Basnayaka Nilame of Sri Maha Kataragama Devalaya is replacing the Devadana Nilame in today's procession. And as we can see, he is walking under a Mutukudaya.
And that marks the end of the Dalada Perahera procession, as we now witness the procession of Sri Mahanatha Devalaya, or the first Devala procession.
And now we see the godly ornaments being carried to be placed on the mount of the ceremonial tusker who would be honored to take the godly ornaments in the streets of Kandy.
And we see the very first elephant, Rohana, belonging to Mr. Varuna Kannangara of Horana, who will be leading the procession with an official carrying a Buddhist flag.
We now see the Buddhist flag bearers representing the Sri Mahanatha Devalaya.
God Natha is believed to be the next Buddha, which is why we see the Natha Devala procession following the Perahera of the Dalada Maligava. And the Buddhist flags represent the connection God Natha has with the story of Buddhism. Therefore, the Natha Devala Perahera is also formed in line with traditional Buddhist worship forms that are more stately and circumspect of their import. And the officials we see in front of us represent the civil defense of Sri Lanka. And following the flag bearers, we see the second elephant in today's procession, who is Arjuna, belonging to the historic Vaurukannala Rajamaha Vihara of Dikwella. And on Arjuna's mount, we see an official carrying the flag of God Natha.
And now we see the heavy troop of Sri Mahanatha Devalaya.
And this heavy troop is trained by Mr. Vijay Sena. Following the heavy troop, we see the mother and the son, Kumari and Bandara, both belonging to Mr. Kamal Kitsiri of Kottava. And it has to be mentioned that Kumari and Bandara are both regular participants of the Sri Mahanatha Devala procession.
And now we see the Nayandi performers of Sri Natha Devalaya. These Nayandi performers have been trained by the Vishuddhi Kalayatanaya.
It is believed that the Nayandi dance act is only second to the traditional West dance form, isn't it, Isru?
Indeed, Nilesh. In fact, the fundamental difference between the two dance forms is that the West dance consists of the headgear or the tiara, whereas the Nayandi performance is done without the headgear or the tiara that is used in the West dance.
following this Nayandi dance act, we see two more elephants of the Sri Mahanatha Devale joining the procession. On one side, we see Vijitaraja, belonging to Venerable Millane Sirialankara Thero, the chief incumbent of the historic Dibulagala Rajamahawihara in Polonnaruwa, and Kandula, belonging to Mr. Roshan Patirana of Maharagama.
Mounted on these beautiful elephants, we see symbols of sun and the moon. This demonstrates the pledge of our ancient kings to hold this annual festival until the sun and the moon lasts.
And next up, we see the Savarang dance performers, who are represented in this procession by the Salita Kalayatanaya. This is in fact similar to the Chamara fans, where the Savarang dance uses fans made of fine threads to send in cooling breezes in devotion to the godly ornaments.
It should be noted that color yellow is closely associated with the Natha Devala procession, and this is because God Natha is believed to be yellow in his complexion.
Which is why we would see the color yellow in all of the elephant costumes and the dancers in this procession today. An interesting fact about this Savarang instrument is that it is said it was made out of the tail of the Semara deer that lived in India, and that is used for this purpose. And after the Savarang dance act, we see Tharaka, belonging to the Basnayaka Nilame of the Sri Mahanatha Devalaya, Mr. Gayan Hinkenda himself.
Following that, we see another Pantheru performance under Sri Mahanatha Devalaya. The Pantheru can be called a semi-classical folk dance also. The origin of this dance goes back to the ancient ritual called Suvise Vivarana, as we mentioned before. This Pantheru performance is energized and added more colors with acrobatic movements by the Pantheru performance.
And those Pantheru performers were trained by the Nimesh Kalayatanaya. And following this Pantheru dance act, we now see Lasanda, who belongs to the Devinura Upulwan Vishnu Devalaya.
Up next, we see another Nayandi dancing troupe.
And these Nayandi dance performers are trained by Asanka Karunanayaka. Even though in the Dalada Perahera procession, we saw that the relic casket was escorted by West dancers. In the Devala processions, we see these Nayandi dance performers or Adaves in Sinhala. And this would change in the Randoli Perahera processions, which we would see in 2 more days, where the West dancers will also be involved in welcoming the ceremonial tusker carrying the godly ornaments.
Once again, we see a very energetic performers of the Nayandi dance.
It can be also seen how the traditional upcountry Gataberea provides the music for this dance act. And now we see the chief incumbent of the Sri Mahanatha Devalaya walking in front of the tusker carrying the godly ornaments of God Natha.
And now we see the majestic elephant carrying the godly ornaments of God Natha.
And this ceremonial tusker today is Muthuraja belonging to the Alutkama Kandy Vihara, who is accompanied by Kumari, also belonging to the Kandy Vihara, and Rani, belonging to Mr. Nalaka Jayasingha.
Up next, we see the Vishnu Devala procession's commencement. Now we see the godly ornaments of God Vishnu being carried to be placed on the mount of the sacred elephant, who will be carrying them on the streets of the city of Kandy.
The first item of the Sri Mahavishnu Devala procession is the provincial flag bearers. In fact, God Vishnu is believed to be the god assigned by Lord Buddha to take responsibility of the safety of Sri Lanka, which is why we see the flags of the several provinces of Sri Lanka being carried in this procession.
Indeed, Nilesh. And it should also be added that God Vishnu is also found in Hindu religion, where he is considered as the god who sustains life.
The official who will be walking on the first elephant in the Sri Mahavishnu Devala Perahera will be carrying the flag of the Satara Koralaya, and this elephant leading the procession today is Suranimala, who belongs to the Alutnuara Dadimunda Devalaya.
One can see that those who take part in this procession are mostly clad in blue color. This is because the color associated with God Vishnu is blue.
And now we see the official hay visit route of the Sri Mahavishnu Devalaya. The hay visit route which we see in front of us is a celebration of all traditional Sri Lankan drums.
Indeed, Nilesh. In fact, it is an offering of sound to Lord Buddha that has existed in Sri Lanka since the arrival of Sanghavitha Theri with the sacred Bodhi tree.
If we would talk about these instruments, we see them using the double drums or the thammattama, the traditional Sri Lankan trumpet or the horanava, cymbals which are called thalampata, the budge horns which are the kombua, the conchas which is the hagediya, and also tinkles or anklets that we call gedji in Sinhalese.
The very sound of the Hevesi instruments therefore can invoke the faith or the Shraddha in the Buddhist heart. The Hevesi was introduced to Sri Lanka during the reign of King Devanam Piyatissa.
Following the Hevesi troupe, we see one of the most senior participants of the Sri Mahavishnu Devala procession, who is Banda, belonging to Mr. Sisira Samarakona of Polgahawela.
Up next we see another spectacular Pantheru dance performance. Most of the dance performances of Kandy Esala Perahera are hereditary, and even these Pantheru dance performances are mostly hereditary.
In fact, the main prop of this dance act is the Pantheruva, which is in fact the anklet of goddess Pattini. And according to some legends, this is in fact the Chakrayuda of god Vishnu, which is what this procession is dedicated to.
Now we see another magnificent duo of elephants, and on the mounts of them we see canopy bearers symbolizing the protection provided to the Kandy Esala Perahera.
And these two elephants are Haritha, belonging to Mr. Tusita Ranavaka of Deniyaya, alongside with Muthu, belonging to Venerable Murundeniye Dhammaratana Thero, the chief incumbent of the historic Mutiyangana Rajamahaviharaya.
The Pantheru dancers are performing some very acrobatic moves to the delight of the spectators.
If you would have noticed, we saw the chamber of versifiers or the Kavikara Madu in the Sri Dalada Perahera, which we just noticed. This is one of the main instruments which was used in that particular act.
The robe of the elephants that we see are portrayed with some images of Gurula, a mythical bird who is considered as the vehicle of God Vishnu.
A representation of the Mutyangana Rajamahaviharaya in this Vishnu Devala procession is seen every year. And now in front of us we see the Udaki dance performance.
The Udaki belongs to the Atata music instrument type that is used in Sri Lanka. In fact, this is one of the most unique sound producing instruments that we as Sri Lankans can proudly boast of. It's our own.
Followed by these Udaki dance performers, we see three ladies joining the procession. None belonging to Mr. Sarath Jayalat of Kurunegala, Mali belonging to Mr. Chatura Vikramanayaka of Horana, and Muthu belonging to Mr. Indika Mudurkot of Manikinna. It has to be mentioned that None, Mali and Muthu are always participants of the Sri Mahavishnu Devala procession.
Following that, we see another troupe of Nayandi dance performers. Accompanied by the Yakbereya, these dance performers are singing hymns and praises to Lord Buddha.
And the role of these Nayandi performers are to welcome the tusker carrying the godly ornaments of God Vishnu. Now we see the godly ornaments of God Vishnu being carried, gleaming in vibrant blue color. And the ceremonial tusker carrying the godly ornaments of God Vishnu in today's fourth Kumbal procession is Rama, belonging to Mr. Tudor Gunasekar of Heyanthudua. And Rama is accompanied by Sita, belonging to Mrs. Nilanthavira Singha of Mirigama, and Vasana, belonging to Mrs. Krishanti Alapatha of Ratnapura. That marks the end of the Vishnu Devala procession and the commencement of the Sri Maha Kataragama Devala procession. The procession of God Kataragama is in fact the third Devala procession that we will be seeing in today's Perahera. We see a group of Buddhist flag bearers led by a flag bearer depicting an image of God Kataragama. And now we see the flag of God Ravana, who is being led in this part of the procession to mark the beginning of the procession of God Kataragama. Amidst the Buddhist flags, we also see several provincial flags being carried in the Kataragama Devala procession, which some depict the peacock, who is considered as the godly vehicle of God Kataragama. The Kataragama Devalaya in Kandy had been built in the 14th century and it became more popular in the 16th century. It was dedicated to God Skanda Kumara or God Kataragama. It is believed
that he has 6 faces and 12 hands.
And in several parts of the procession, we will be seeing the color red and the icon of the peacock, since both of them are affiliated with the affair of god Kataragama.
God Kataragama is not only revered by the Buddhists but also by the Hindu pilgrims. It is believed that God Kataragama or Skandakumar is the son of the chief god Ishvara. This is the war god of Hindu religion.
There are many situational variants of Hevisi, such as the Kemura, Yama, and Puja, to name a few, which all compromise of their distinct tunes. And what we see ahead in front of us can be classified as the Gaman Hevisi, or a mobile orchestra. And this team of Hevisi is trained by Mr. P.V. James Gurunanse.
Hevisi troops typically consist of 5 music producing beats. We call them Atata, Vitata, Vitatatata, Ghana and Susira. This Hevisi troop that we are seeing includes most of them, and we also see a group of castanet players behind them, and this is also part of the Panchaturya Vadana.
Unlike the other Devala processions, we see a Gajanayaka Nilame, or an official of the troop of elephants in the Kataragama Devala Perahera. And the elephant with the Gajanayaka Nilame is Manike, belonging to Mr. Anura Kempitiya of Kegol.
Now we see a spectacular dance of the castanet players. The Thalampota or the castanet is a simple yet very effective musical instrument. It is used in all the 3 main dancing traditions of Sri Lanka, namely the Kandian, Low Country and Sabaragamua.
The Titmatra, or timing pattern of the Kandian dance tradition, is provided by this instrument, the Thalampata or the castanet. This instrument is made of brass and gives out a tone that is at times ringing.
In the Kandian tradition, there are 9 main dancings. Ghanaya dancing is one of them. The castanet players here are making the titte sound effect, and every step they make is in accordance with their beat.
And now we see the second elephant of the Sri Maha Kataragama Devalaya, and this is Kadira, belonging to the Vipashyarama temple in Maharagama. And on Kadira's mount, we see an official carrying a canopy to symbolize protection to the godly ornaments of god Kataragama.
Following that, we see a wooden stick dance performers. This dance performance is very energetic, and as you can hear, they are singing with a lot of energy and excitement.
This team of energetic dancers are trained by Mr. Upali Dharmaratna from Matale.
Compared to the other Devala processions, the Kataragama Devala procession has a faster beat, isn't it, Nilesh?
Indeed. And now in front of us we see another elephant, and this is Sama, belonging to Venerable Uduwe Dhammaloka Thero, the chief incumbent of the Alan Mathiniyarama temple in Kirulapana.
And now we see another hand drum or udaki players troupe. The udaki is a Sri Lankan drum. As ancient as it is, this musical instrument has been mentioned in our ancient literature as Sirivasa instrument. This instrument can be instantly tuned by the udaki player while he is playing it. It is truly an amazing sight to see how these performers sing songs, dance, play the tune and instrument at the same time.
The speciality of these performers is that they play the instrument and join the procession while chanting songs that are dedicated to the great characteristics and qualities of Lord Buddha. And following these Udaki dancers, we see two elephants joining the procession. On one side we see Ratna, belonging to the chief incumbent of the Siripada and the Palmadul Rajamahawihare, Venerable Bengamuwe Dhammadinna Thero, and Panduka, belonging to the Ganevatta Kataragama Devala in Piliyandala, who is under the responsibility of Mr. Chandana Katriyarachchi.
Following that, we see the next Nayandi performers troupe in Sri Maha Kataragama Devala procession.
And these Nayandi dancers are trained by Mr. Upananda Thalgahagoda of the Ratna Kalayatanaya. And the role of these Nayandi dancers are to welcome the godly ornaments of God Kataragama.
Who we witness now is the chief trustee or the Iyer of Sri Maha Kataragama Devalaya. This is the individual tasked with the protection of the godly ornaments of God Khatharagama or God Skanda.
The role of carrying the godly ornaments of God Khatharagama is designated to the elephant Esala, belonging to Venerable Katugastota Sharada Thero, the chief incumbent of the Pirisiala Senanayaka Pirivena, and Esala is accompanied by Chula, belonging to Venerable Bengamue Dhammadinna Thero of the Palmadula Rajamaha Viharaya, and Sankaraja, belonging to Venerable Kolambageyara Mahinda Thero, the chief incumbent of the Sankapada Rajamaha Viharaya.
With that, we mark the end of the Sri Maha Khatharagama Devala procession and the beginning of the Sri Maha Pattini Devala procession. And now we see the Alatti Ammas performing their rituals before the commencement of the procession. Now we see the Buddhist flag bearers representing the Pattini Devala procession.
And following the Buddhist flags, we see the official heavy troop of the Sri Maha Pattini Devalaya, and these are trained by Mr. M.G. Palita Nishanka, Mr. M.G. Sirisena, and Mr. M.G. Premadasa.
Goddess Pattini is a deity who commands great respect among the citizenry of the country. This is the only female representation at the Dalanga procession. Therefore, in this segment of the procession alone, we are able to see female dancers performing.
Folklore has stated that the goddess Pattini was a great model who preserved her chastity, and due to this great and noble quality, she could obtain the highest veneration of human beings.
Belief in Goddess Pattini with faith brought blessings on small children and women. She is supposed to be a goddess of the noblest qualities, and those who believed in her were cured of hidden diseases, skin diseases, etc., provided they led a religious life. In the face of plagues and famines, people sought the protection of Goddess Pattini for this reason.
And now we see the first elephant of the Sri Mahapattini Devala procession, who is Mangala, belonging to the Venerable Mahanayaka Thero of the Sri Lanka Ramana Nikaya, and is under the responsibility of Mr. Udara Galapatti of Giriulla. And on Mangala's mount we see an official carrying a Buddhist flag.
With that, we begin to see the first female representation of Kandy Esala Perahera. Now, these female dances can only be found in the Pattini Devala procession. This is a troupe of female Pantheru dancers.
The belief in Goddess Pattini with faith brought blessings on small children and women, where she is supposed to be a goddess of noblest qualities, and those who believed in her were cured of hidden diseases and skin diseases, etc.
The addition of the female representation has indeed brought a lot of color to the Kandy Esala Perahera. The beauty of these dances and the amazing movements of their performance adds extra color to the great Esala procession. The color attributed to goddess Pattini is also yellow. Therefore, during the procession of Sri Maha Pattini Devalaya, we will see yellow color in most of the robes and in the garments.
And this elephant in front of us is Sita, who belongs to Mr. Roshan Patirana of Maharagama.
And now we see a group of mixed folk dancers. The mixed folk dance is a dance depicting the agrarian society which prevailed in ancient Sri Lanka. It was a collaborative function. So both the males and the females took part in it. And this act shows the harvesting process, which was one of the most important parts of the ancient Sinhalese villager.
Most of the traditional Sri Lankan dance acts are designed to portray various activities of Sri Lankan culture, and this particular dance act simply depicts a picture of a village. Isn't it, Isuru?
Indeed, Nilesh. With that, we see another young elephant, I would say. Who is this?
And that elephant was Tarindu, who belongs to Venerable Kobawaka Damminda Thero, the chief incumbent of the Kataragama Kirivehera Rajamaha Viharaya.
Following that, we see another magnificent performance of fan dancers.
And this dance performance is trained by Miss Ajanta Kandegedara of the Sarasavi Kala Ayatane of Molagoda.
The fan dancing is accompanied by beautiful flute sound and castanet sounds. We hear traditional folk music being played by these music instrument players. This reminds us of the ancient culture that we used to have in Sri Lanka.
And just like the female dance performers, we see many female elephants taking part in the Sri Mahapattini Devala Perahera. Just like Rani and Kumari we see in front of us, both representing from Balangoda.
And now we see a female West dancing troupe. In fact, we don't really find this performance in any other procession.
In fact, it can be called as a traditional upcountry dance performance that is designed for the female representation.
Indeed, the Shirsha Bharana Paladavima, or the placement of the headgear, is considered as the highest title a female West dancer can attain, and these dancers have all attained this position.
This shows how genderly diverse the Sri Lankan traditional dancing is. And following this upcountry female dance act, we see another female elephant taking part, and this elephant is Manike, who belongs to Mrs. Shriyani Gunawardana of Dangovita. It has to be noted that Manike has been a participant of the Sri Mahapattini Devala procession for a long period of time.
Following Manike, we now see a group of Nayandi dancers under Sri Mahapattini Devala procession.
And this Nayandi dance performers who are trained by the Mithun Bandara Kala Ayatane of Watapulluwa is the final Nayandi dance performance we will see for the day.
The elaborate footworks of the Nayandi dancers are second to none. Sometimes they will be fast and sometimes they will be stiff. The Nayandi dancing takes years of practice to their performers to master.
And the role of these Nayandi dancers are to welcome the ceremonial elephant carrying the godly ornaments of Goddess Pattini. And now we see the chief incumbent of the Sri Mahapattini Devalaya in Kandy, and behind him we see the ceremonial elephant Bibila, who belongs to the Venerable Mahanayaka Thero of the Sri Lanka Amarapura Nikaya, who is currently under the responsibility of Mr. Udara Galappatti of Giriyulla, who will be carrying the godly ornaments of Goddess Pattini today. In fact, 2020 was the first time we saw Bibila doing this role in the Sri Mahapattini Devalaya. And accompanying Bibila, we see Bandara belonging to Mr. Kitsiri Kahatapiti of Horana and Manike belonging to Mr. H.R. Nishanka of Kegol.
With that, we mark the end of the 4th Kumbal Perahera. We are grateful for the help and commitment of both state and non-state supporters who work tirelessly to make this event successful.
Let there be timely rains that will bring life-giving water to our fields and ensure a bountiful harvest.
May our country prosper. Dalanda Samidu Pihitai.